Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. So, in this video, I wanted to give you guys a brief summary of my trip to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I have some other footage that I'll be dropping as well. In that footage, I still got to do voiceovers. It's really just, during the drive, comparing the performance of T-Mobile and AT&T, and I'll speak to that here in this video briefly, and just summarizing the trip. So T-Mobile performed quite well, as you can see on screen. I mean, 1.4 gigs. That's strong performance. So they've obviously had some ultra capacity deployed, but they didn't have it deployed throughout the entire trip. So I want to point that out. There was a huge amount of that stretch where it was just low band 5G, N25, N71, and it did not perform as what you're seeing on the screen now. So I want to point that out. I don't want to make it seem like they performed that great the entire trip. That just wasn't the case. So it's quite interesting. So I remember taking this trip years and years and years ago when we were still using flip phones, and I remember just taking the Interstate 25 straight shot going to Albuquerque. But this go around, for whatever reason, the GPS took us a different route, so we took a back road, going back up to the 25. So I said, screw it, we'll take that, and I just want to see how the network behaves going off the interstate, because sometimes the carriers will just have two sectors, one pointing up, one pointing down, and as soon as you get off of the interstate, you have no service. And to my surprise, T-Mobile worked quite well. They were very strong off the interstate. There was even a river in between. If you can see the Rio Grande, there was a river in between. So off the interstate, T-Mobile performed quite well. They did cut out quite a bit, but for the most part, they maintained service for the length of what it took to get all the way to Hatch, New Mexico, but I also want to point out, right? I got to call it even. Got to be fair. AT&T did have less cutouts, so AT&T was able to maintain its LTE connection for more of that part of the trip. So that's something I got to point out, right? The reliability piece, the FirstNet piece, they had cutouts too, but T-Mobile did cut out a bit more versus AT&T. So I wanted to point that out. So then the interesting part started as we headed towards Hatch, New Mexico, and we actually got into that area in Hatch, New Mexico itself. T-Mobile had zero coverage in Hatch, New Mexico. I don't know what it was, but there was nothing. It went straight to SOS mode, no service, while AT&T still maintained LTE. And yes, for that stretch, outside of Las Cruces, and then all the way till we got closer to the county of Albuquerque, AT&T was 99% LTE that whole stretch. So there was hardly any 5G, but we'll get to that in later on in the video. So what I did notice on the way back, there was a cell site that had T-Mobile equipment on it, but it must not be active yet. So this would be another coverage fill-in, if you will, once that site goes active. And they would bring coverage and another option to a small market rural area in Hatch, New Mexico. It's a very small population town, but today, as it stands right now, the only option is AT&T and Verizon. We drove through that town a little bit. T-Mobile has zero coverage. And then the reason you see that big circle, it took about another 8 to 10 miles outside of Hatch to pick up any type of coverage again. So T-Mobile, and I even have a shot here of their actual coverage map. So T-Mobile is stating that there's coverage when there's not. So I wanted to be fair and point that out to you who might be traveling or heading to that area anytime soon. There is no coverage whatsoever. If you look off to the left of this map, You see that white spot? That's how it is all around. I don't know who mapped this for T-Mobile or who thought it was accurate. It's not accurate. There is absolutely zero service throughout Hatch, New Mexico. And it takes about another 8 to 10 miles on the Interstate 25 before you pick up service again. So I wanted to make that very clear. Now that's not the entire trip, I know, but I wanted to make that clear and not leave that out because it's a fact. They cut out bad going through Hatch, New Mexico. But once you get past this patch, it's smooth sailing for the rest of the trip. T-Mobile maintains service. They might have very small cutouts. I think I had 2 cutouts where it dropped to no service for like 3 or 4 seconds, but it maintained service for the rest of the way. Good performing too. And it was N71, N25. I saw the sites. T-Mobile upgraded them. And same with AT&T. AT&T maintained. They had service in Hatch. They had LTE, right? It was LTE, but I want to point something out. And I've heard people say that in other videos and content and tech blogs as well. So the 5G performance, it was faster in some cases, right? But it wasn't that much different from the LTE performance that AT&T provided. So I know there's all this hype around 5G, and I kind of want to bring that down in this video. And I know my platform is not that big, but if it's not ultra capacity deployed on this stretch, the performance is quite similar. So as an example, if T-Mobile did 70, 80 megabits on N25, N71, AT&T did, 40, 50 megabits on LTE. Again, yes, T-Mobile is faster, but the end result, right, on the user experience, it's going to be the same. It's not really that different, and you'll see that in the other videos that I'll upload as well. It's not that big of a difference between the two technologies. Yes, eventually AT&T will get 5G on that stretch too once they could heavily convert the Nokia to Ericsson. Yes, the Albuquerque area is Ericsson. Nokia going to Ericsson. Everything, I would say about 50 miles or so outside of Las Cruces, it's all Nokia for AT&T. So they have a lot of upgrading to do, but once they upgrade all that to Ericsson, that's going to be 5G. But again, unless it's ultra capacity, and you guys saw it at the beginning of the video, 1.4 gigs, unless it's that, the performance is not that drastically different between the 5G and the LTE. And I know some of you have established that already a long time ago, but I just wanted to point that out again as T-Mobile matures in the 5G deployment and they deepen even that footprint. It hasn't made that significant of a difference where I would tell you, hey, you know what, this AT&T LTE connection is not cutting it. Go and get this T-Mobile 5G connection. No. And in fact, with the cutouts that I've experienced on T-Mobile, I would still have to recommend and be fair that AT&T had the more reliable network on this stretch because it cut out less. And the cutouts were less of a time that they had no service. So like I said, there was an 8 to 10 mile stretch where T-Mobile had absolutely nothing. AT&T worked. And then on the stretch where AT&T did cut out to no service, it was like maybe 30, 60 seconds and it picked back up. So if you have T-Mobile as your only option during that 8 to 10 mile stretch and something happens, you're SOL. Now, I know that Apple has a satellite thing and everything, but in that instant, if you're in God forbid, if you're in an emergency and you're nervous, your adrenaline's pumping, you're not going to think to go into this setting, that setting, and turn on that satellite. You're going to be all over the place. you're just going to need the phone to work. And during that stretch, it just wouldn't work on T-Mobile. And I want to be open and honest about that as part of the summary, because it was just a simple fact. T-Mobile cut out for that long, where AT&T still maintained a very strong LTE signal. So going up towards Albuquerque, once we got closer to it, then T-Mobile started to shine with the ultra capacity, 5, 6, 7, 800 megabits, and they got really, really strong, lots of good density. That's where AT&T was weaker, right? They still, once you got closer to Albuquerque, the bigger city, both maintained service as they should, but AT&T has a lot of work to do, and that's something that I want to point out as well. They are in the middle of converting from Nokia to Ericsson in that market. There is 0.5% of C-band in that market. There is no, I did not spot any NR in that market, meaning besides the mid-band, C-band and DoD, like N2, N5, nothing. It's all LTE, and I spotted some 5GE. So they pretty much put that market on hold as it comes to Nokia. They upgraded it when they did the whole FirstNet thing. But outside of that, as we got closer to 5G actually becoming a thing, they haven't touched that market. So they left that alone. And now, according to the build plan, it is a priority. So it's going to go from not being good to being a lot better once this conversion is done. So with this conversion, a lot of the sites will get C-band and DoD. It will get NR radios. It will get the better performing Ericsson equipment. I saw a lot of outdated Nokia stuff there. You know, comparing that to what Nokia has in the market today, it's crazy how outdated that equipment was for AT&T in that market. And it performed as such. At the hotel that we stayed at, AT&T did like, I don't know, 8, 9 megabits per second. And T-Mobile did 500 megabits per second. So that's where you would have noticed that performance difference. If you were streaming anything in 4K on the T-Mobile connection, it would have worked. AT&T wouldn't have been able to do it. It would have dropped in the it would have dropped to 1080, 720, whatever, right? So that's still that difference that you can see and notice. But I fully anticipate AT&T to be largely complete by the end of the year, and then they're going to need probably another 6 months of next year to really dig into that market and get that conversion completed, and that will get that market better performing for AT&T overall. Now, that's not to say it doesn't perform great today, right? It gets the day-to-day stuff done. And they do rank number 1 on root metrics, so I also want to point that out as well. With the outdated Nokia equipment, with not having any mid-band on air, they still rank number 1. So they must have done something right? But now we're moving to Ericsson. There's going to be C-band and DoD deployed. They're going to add further densification. So it's going to get better in that market. And that's also a market I want to point out that AT&T is deploying fiber, AT&T fiber, using the whole the Air Gig or Gig Air, whatever it's called, with BlackRock. So that's going to be another market to focus in on that too, because I saw a lot of the billboards where AT&T is already advertising 5 gigs coming soon. So they are heavily involved in deploying lots of marketing and advertising for that market. And they have to follow that with a better network, right? If they continue to grow share on the fiber side and they can converge that into wireless, they're going to have to present that market with a better performing wireless network. And AT&T feels that with just converting from Nokia to Ericsson, they can provide that better performing network. And then, of course, the mid-band that comes with that as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I have to go back next year anyway, so we'll see if that's true. We'll see if AT&T does perform better after the conversions. I fully anticipate they do. And T-Mobile, they just have to keep doing what they're doing. I mean, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. They perform great there. No, no doubt about it. They have a lot of densification in that market. I saw a lot of macros, like a mile apart site spacing. So it's just what we've come used to from T-Mobile in the mid-size to major markets. They have high market share in Albuquerque. They have high market share here. They have a huge call center in Albuquerque. So a lot of people use T-Mobile there, and they've built the network to support such. And I drove around to the Rio Rancho Event Center. I was on Alameda Street, for those of you who are familiar with the area, and they performed great, 6, 7, 800 megabits per second. I mean, it was just a great performing overall network. Now, of course, I wasn't able to touch the entire market, so there's probably areas where T-Mobile struggles too. So, those are just areas that they'll have to fix. But they had great densification, lots of ultra capacity, which they had a head start. So they're already 4 years, almost 5 years in. So you would fully expect that from them. So overall, right, to close out this video, not to make it too long, I have to give it to AT&T. I got to look at the stretch going up to Albuquerque, and then I got to look at, okay, did AT&T also maintain enough performance for the day-to-day tasks? And overall, AT&T just simply performed better, less cutouts. Even though it was LTE, like I said, the performance difference from the 5G to the LTE was not significant enough to where I sit here and say you couldn't have done that on AT&T. It would have been the same similar outcome on the AT&T connection as on the T-Mobile connection, but AT&T just had less cutouts, more reliable across the board versus T-Mobile. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. I just wanted to do this quick summary. Then tomorrow I'll upload the other content that I was able to film during the trip, so you guys can see the performance. I don't want to say that the AT&T was lackluster because it was just LTE, so I had less footage of that. But I wanted to point that out too, so you can see like, okay, this is how the 5G is performing, and this is how the AT&T LTE is performing. And then you can see for yourself, okay, yeah, this is very similar, so not much of a difference. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe if you're new. Follow my social media outlets as Tyrone with Tech Life. See y'all in the next one. Peace.